Hi, thanks for joining. We are here to talk about estate modernization. I'm joined with Kyle Smith, who's the GVP of Oracle Cloud Transformation, and I'm Stephanie Trenzo, and I run a team around strategy and transformation. We're going to talk with you today about some transformational entry points, the estate modernization imperative and what's going on in the world around us, defining what does estate modernization really mean, and then we're going to talk a little bit about a very special co-branded offering that we have called Elevate with Deloitte. So you've likely heard about Gartner's concept of bimodal IT, sometimes called two-speed IT. And this is kind of characterizing the problem that emerged years ago between systems of record, legacy systems that are often regulated by various kinds of governance and often architected over time, making them pretty slow to change. And then the systems of engagement or systems of interaction, which are typically applications where the users live on the web or in mobile, and they have to really change at the speed of business. And so lurking out there at the same time is this idea of the systems of intelligence, or AI and ML. And most traditional approaches ask you to look at each of these systems independently, and you're forced to also allocate budget independently. The way that Oracle approaches this, and the way that we like to think about it, is in this concept of tri-modal IT. In other words, can you look at it where you're at the center of the Venn diagram and all of your efforts and resources are applying to all three of those systems? And so rather than thinking about them as discrete buckets, we look at it holistically. Often the same activities happen regardless of which entry point you're coming from, whether it is a data transformation that you're looking at, how do you get more insights out of your data? Whether it's that you need to create more digital channels, and so you're looking at digital transformation, or what we're going to talk with you about today, which is estate modernization, driving transformation through a more intentional and foundational approach to your legacy systems and your existing tech footprint. So presumably none of the quotes on the screen are surprising, or hundreds of others that you can find in different studies. As rapidly as technology is changing is exactly as rapidly as companies are unfortunately accruing more and more technical debt. And so you need to accelerate a fresh approach to your business. Meredith Whalen, who has some really wonderful research and novel ways of looking at trends and patterns, is pointing out that it's time to rethink the risk profile of your data centers. And the great news is that our very own Clay Magoric can attest Oracle can really help out with that with 30 to 50% savings. So who wouldn't like to suddenly have a 50% increase in budget to spend on innovation? I spoke to several hundred C-level decision makers at a thought leadership forum fairly recently on how the pandemic has accelerated their digital transformations. And one of the questions that they asked me was, if I had a crystal ball, and if I could go back, a year and a half from now, what recommendations would I give? And, other than investing in a few more pairs of sweatpants, I could really say that we don't need a crystal ball for the right advice on how to think about modernization. Most of these initiatives, as attested to in the different studies shown on the slide here from Gartner, McKinsey to IDC, most of you know what the imperatives are that you need to pay attention to. It's just about prioritizing them. And so taking them off of the backlog and making them happen, preferably not instigated by a pandemic, but rather by the power that cloud has and the desire to really shift towards growth. So what do we mean when we say estate modernization? It's not simply lifting and shifting workloads, databases, and applications to any single cloud. You don't pack up all of the furniture, clothes that don't fit, the pots and pans that you don't use, and move them into a new house. It's really looking at the estate, re-architecting with intention, determining where all of that technical debt really is. Is some portion of it only at a 0% interest rate? Okay, great, maybe we don't move that. Modernization is putting a thoughtful eye towards an inventory, assessment, and a multi-cloud hybrid approach. And yes, it's across technology and assets, but it's also about the new ways of working, the new skills that are going to be needed, and it should all be in the context of the overall company strategy. So Kyle can help us get into some practical advice about when using an estate modernization lens is a great approach for your transformation. Kyle?
Yeah, absolutely, Stephanie. Thank you. And as you were talking, right, estate modernization is happening within your enterprise, within your competitors, with your customers. Everyone's modernizing something. It's really about, are you having a level of intentionality of how you look across your entire estate as you do that? And one of the ways that we help customers really identify, is this something you're going to prioritize? Is it something that's going to move your business forward beyond just the incremental upgrades and updates that you're doing? It's looking at your business priorities. And what we see is there's three kind of crux points within the business priorities of initiatives that you have that then can align quickly to what you're doing from a cost lever and then also an IT lever perspective. And those three really fit into, do you need to make transformational and strategic investments directly as it relates to your technology today? Do you need to look at how you optimize your corporate systems, or how you're optimizing a specific way that you go to market, or enabling your sales field or your channel capabilities? And if so, then what you do is you look through that lens for your cost levers and IT levers. Conversely, if you're looking at your business and saying, we need to make investments in innovation, we need to either align with the disruptions that are happening within the marketplace, we need to go capitalize on a new market capability we see in the area. And as we do that, we need to look through the IT assets that we have and say, is there a place here where we can leverage what we have today, modernize it to actually have an advantage in the marketplace as opposed to just building that new? And then the last one, which is sometimes the most straightforward, is simply, are we having economic pressures? Are we having business strategy pressures that means that we need to reduce our operational costs? And that's when we're really talking about paying down technical debt. How do we get to a point where we're maximizing our efficiency at what we do today and that we do well? But is there a way to even improve upon that? The cost levers and IT levers then bundle into the different areas, which Stephanie was kind of showing there on the screen right there, where we're able to start looking at, yeah, we can get rid of our labor costs, we can get rid of some of our IT assets, but we should only do that as we're managing against the other core components. And that kind of goes into this kind of circular reference of things that we want to be looking at. So, and those are really, if we're looking at reducing labor costs, if we're looking at restructuring some of our IT assets, can we do it in a way that reduces risk? Can we do it in a way that we're actually increasing our agility and flexibility, not actually becoming more beholden to new technologies that are locking us in? Are we able to look at these things and actually self-fund the journey? Are we able to say, what we want to do is not going to create a huge capital investment out of the front. We're going to make it so that it's neutral to the business so that we can continue to prioritize the things the business wants to invest in, as opposed to trying to pause those things and move forward. And that's where we think the program that we have across Oracle really makes sense from an estate modernization process. Because
Kyle, one thing I might throw in there is that point that you just made on self-funding innovation. I think, we just talked about how often you already know that these imperatives exist. You just have not prioritized them for your business. And many times we hear clients say to us, it's because they can't figure out how to make the budget work as much as they wish that they could prioritize this kind of modernization. So with this approach, I think that's one of the real benefits, is that we open the door to enabling them to prioritize what they know they ought to do.
I agree, Stephanie, and I couldn't have said it better, because really that's what the programs that we have created, as the Elevate program is an excellent case in point of that, where we've worked with our partner Deloitte to understand how their operational business models, their financial models, the way that they're able to work with a customer align with the Oracle technology suites, both in the application and the infrastructure place, in addition to our ability to create commercial models that are appealing to the customer, to make this as budget neutral as possible, and in most cases, actually make it budget positive day one. And that's a big deal when you think about how are you going to pay down this technical debt? Yes, state modernization is great, and oftentimes you're able to do it opportunistically. But when you're able to look at it as a whole program that says we're going to align releasing these dollars and these funds and these capabilities out of our existing IT infrastructure through a modernization program, and then we're actually then going to be able to use those funds for enhancements or innovation initiatives, it becomes a bit of a game changer. And that's really what Elevate's about, right? So we have Deloitte, who's there able to deliver world-class advisory services, working with the customers that they work with in and day out, able to help understand how these investments can use in their business operational models, help provide a lens for where there's market disruptions coming, where innovation investments would make sense. And then using Oracle's best-in-class cloud technologies, both at the infrastructure layer, the platform capabilities, and then our SaaS application transformation capabilities, really showing how you can create an end-to-end solution that optimizes your estate over what you've traditionally seen in IT. And then we're able to bundle all of that together with an Oracle financing arm that makes sure that it's reducing the risk. You're able to make sure that you have steady cash flow and operational optics, and your estate modernization now isn't a onesie-twosie opportunistic point of view. It's truly a program with very specific objectives, with very specific cost takeout metrics, with very specific optimization metrics that you're able to go back to your business and say, this is what we're going to deliver.
And I think to kind of tie that back to the tri-modal IT concept as well, rather than looking at estate modernization as something that's only a cost or an investment on your bottom line, it's actually now enabling you to show the optics back to the business, to your point, that this is really something that's going to drive your ability to innovate and grow the business as well.
Correct. Absolutely. And estate modernization, we're talking about that today, but it's really just one lens of the Elevate program, right? There's estate modernization where we're looking at in application capabilities, but there's also data center transformation. Just how are you going to get out of your aging assets today, the way that you've had to manage IT because of the limitations of technology over the decades, and move it into something that allows you to transformation into a highly automated, highly resilient, self-healing solution. And then how do you take that and then continue that into the digital transformation space, where you're able to take a lot of your legacy assets, make sure they're appropriately digitized, expose the data appropriately from a democratization of the data to your internal teams, as well as think of new ways to be able to asset the application components. Again, kind of looking at that tri-modal lens, right? Where can you find that place where your systems that have typically just been there as a fulfillment arm, now providing data to your teams that allows you to now think about which new markets could you potentially capture, what products should you be investing in and doubling down on. All of these insights can come through that digital transformation, which is enabled through bringing out the cost, using that funding to actually fund these programs. And if this is something that's of interest, we have built the appropriate models and the tools to help you think through the economics of this. Traditionally, what would happen in an estate modernization program is you would look at the initial costs associated with moving to a cloud property or moving to a new set of application portfolios. And you would have to account for that cost up front before you'd actually be able to see the downturn investment. The way that we see that is normally that's going to be problematic in looking at your near-term budgeting cycles. There's simply not the funds available to do it. So what Elevate does is it looks at that spend curve to actually look at what your optimization model is, locks in the savings, and then creates a smooth cash flow payment for your budgetary concerns starting in year 1 through year 4 or 5, however long your estate modernization program is going to last, so that you can actually bring those cost savings and funding forward right at the beginning of the program and actually continue to see them throughout your effort.
And I think this last bullet here, change your investment strategy from maintenance to innovation, is the optics part of this, right? If we can, as we talk with our clients, help them demonstrate that these changes and the investment in their technology strategy, especially in some of these legacy systems, as Kyle was saying, it's not just about maintaining their existing footprint or the decisions that maybe were made 10, 15, 20 years ago. It's about shifting it so that now they can actually invest towards growth in the business.
And the way that the model works is just as you mentioned, right? With that investment lens on, look at where you are today. What is your maintenance cost? What do you want to spend in your modernization? Do you already have a sense of what are the innovation programs that are underfunded today, right? And if we can look at those components, one, we can show you exactly what we think a fully optimized environment looks like from your estate day 1, using our internal industry benchmarking calculators that we've developed and co-branded with Deloitte, and really kind of makes up the backbone of the Elevate program. But once we're there, what we like to do is work with you over a 3 to 6 week period to really understand what are the movable objects within your environment, really understand what parts of your estate you like to prioritize, and then also make sure we understand and have a view for how you would transfer the funds from your existing operational and maintenance costs into those programs that allows your IT organization to be more efficient, to provide that additional value into the specific business programs you want to fund. And then once you have that, you're able then to switch the curve. And we'll show that with our evolution framework that shows how we simultaneously draw down your maintenance operational expenditure costs. We draw down some of your capital expenditure costs you would typically see in a traditional modernization program. And we're able to release that into the ability to continue to innovate, both on the platforms that you're moving to as part of the estate modernization, but then also the ability to extend those into new business domains. And we feel Oracle is uniquely qualified to help with this because our portfolio of technology is so broad, and they can all co-locate within the same cloud solution. So when you're able to bring your custom applications, your bespoke applications, the Oracle applications that you have, as well as other vendors, you're able to align that with a very robust platform strategy from a database engineering technology, data warehousing technology, able to just look at that with visualizations and some of our really best-in-class AI, ML capabilities. Then you also get to then decide what's the best deployment choice for where you are at, right? Is it cloud on-premise through our products like Exadata Cloud at Customer, or our dedicated region capabilities where we're able to actually deploy the Oracle Cloud in your environment? Is it using our public cloud and aligning that with our SaaS capabilities, which are located and integrated within the exact same tenancy? Whatever it might be, because we have all these options, we're able to then really kind of curate a perfect strategy for you. And so if you're thinking, is estate modernization the path we should go on? A lot of it has to do with how, as an organization, you're tackling what you're going to be doing with your legacy assets, right? Who's shaping your cloud strategy today? Are you able to get the IT groups sitting down with the application owners, those who understand the workflow processes, your data science or data analytic teams and say, let's come up with a holistic view to how we're going to not leave applications behind as we continue to try to innovate, right? And then also think about what your innovation curve is. Where do you start? Is the most innovation stuff you're doing with a data science program? Is the most innovation stuff you're doing with a factory automation process? Whatever it is, what you want to do is start with those innovation concepts and think, if we could release funds to further enable our IT investments, our capability investments in this space, what would that look like? And as you fund that, you'll be able to decide things like, culturally, is it important for us to run our own data centers, or is some of the IT operations not a differentiator for our business? How do we move away from things that aren't a differentiator and focus on those things are? And how can we use the cloud solutions and capabilities in an estate modernization to commoditize and release the corporate resources that we have tied into them, right? And once you've done that, you can then start talking about the maximization, how do you maximize the value across all of your cloud solution providers, all of your application providers, as part of a robust and complete estate modernization strategy.
And I also want to add, as we've talked with many, many clients, and Kyle and I have together shared most of those discussions, one of the things that comes up most often as they're thinking through where do they begin or what's the right area for the biggest impact. Also, we consider adding the conversation around what are the skills that they have, thinking about the workforce, understanding the processes. So to Kyle's point, if you allow strategy and where innovation needs to happen based on the business imperatives, you can shape the whole conversation, not only the technology piece, but also the people and the processes and all of the things that enable you to get the biggest value out of this investment.
So if you're looking for a place to get started, these are kind of the things that we see as telltale signs that you are ready to at least start digging into what an estate modernization project or program is going to look like. It's when you recognize that the high degree of technical debt you have is limiting your ability to move what you have today into a cloud property without a lot of effort, right? Recognizing you have those components, those anchors in your system that you absolutely have to resolve. And quite honestly, if you try to resolve them on your own, you're not going to get the funding to do so because they are cost prohibitive in themselves. The other thing is you, as a corporate initiative, have a desire to get out of the data center business, whether that be running the operations, whether dealing with colos, whether having to deal with disaster recovery capabilities and understanding the high cost and having to maintain redundant systems in the event of emergency. The other is, are you at an inflection point with your buy cycles? Are you looking at a large capital investment you're going to have to be making in the near term? And when I say near term, I mean even in the 2 to 3 year time frame, because these programs are not normally 6-month ordeals. So if you're looking at something where you're halfway through your refresh cycle and you recognize that that's going to be a large company imperative, now is the time to start looking at, should we actually even make that investment, or is there the way to use that as an offset to move to cloud? And then recent M&A activity. A lot of the customers we work with are either going through an acquisition or merger, and what they're recognizing is they have to move to a single standard for how they're dealing with IT security, how they do IT infrastructure maintenance and support. And when you look at that, that's a great time to bring both organizations' capabilities to the table. Or if you're a larger organization making a smaller acquisition, thinking through what's the best adoption cycle in order to bring their assets into your standards and be able to bring those assets then on board into your corporate system. And a lot of times just modernizing those applications into a program like this helps you actually reduce the time, sometimes by at least half, of actually getting those assets fully integrated and managed by a single organization. And then the last, which we saw a lot in the last year, is, are you having to respond to a market dynamic. Is there a reason to get cash out of your IT operations immediately so that you can make an investment either in a market change because you're going after something, or market conditions have changed and now you need to look at shoring up the budgets, right? From an IT maintenance perspective, from a corporate maintenance perspective. A lot of times you can use these types of programs, Elevate specifically, to really be able to see the short-term benefits of releasing that fund and making sure that your organization is set for success in the future.
And as Meredith from IDC pointed out, it's also a great time to look at where your budgets sit in terms of OpEx versus CapEx and the kinds of decisions that you might need to make in order to reduce your risk profiles. So, rather than waiting until there is another pandemic or a natural disaster, accelerating these changes in a way that really benefits the business today from a budget perspective and an innovation perspective tomorrow. So Kyle, why don't you bring this to life for us and take us through a real example?
Sure. This is a customer I've been working with now for over a year as part of this program. And we're about 50% through the initial phase of transformation, where we are working with a traditional retail organization that's global. They have made a lot of investments in various assets from a regional perspective. And now they realize that there's an opportunity for them to standardize across their global operations, both from a sales perspective, as well as get some commodity scales with how they handle their manufacturing and distribution, but really didn't have the cash operational ability to make those changes. So working with Oracle and Deloitte, we were able to sit down with their CFO and CIO and put together a plan that really takes where the investments that they've made as they've needed to over the last decade or so and say, we can reduce this technical debt for you. We can consolidate your 29 data centers that you've been operating as kind of independent data centers across regions. We can help you remove the end-of-life servers and assets that right now don't have the funding in order to maintain to where you want them to be from a security and performance perspective. And we're going to be able to do this because of the fact that we'll have a standardized cloud operating model. We'll be able to create a standardized chart of accounts for you to work with so that you can understand your financial health and roll-ups across all these different components. We'll be able to modernize your CRM solution to a SaaS-based solution that will then allow you to enable your direct field sales organization. And as we reduce your 2,000 plus applications and 200 plus applications and rationalize them down to about 50% of that, we're able to take your over 1,200 VMs, rationalize that so that you have efficient strategies for how you do development and test, how you handle disaster recovery, and reduce that down to another 50%. Where you're going to see is a huge cost savings. And what they saw in savings was to the tune of 40 million over that 7-year period, with them actually seeing the cost savings day one, right? What we were able to do is structure the deal appropriately so that we were able to take on the assets that were required to operate within the Oracle Cloud environment. We were able to invest in the professional services and capabilities necessary to migrate these applications using the Deloitte professional services and the Oracle Cloud engineering teams. And we were able to get them on a path where they're going to be able to continue to operate their CRM solutions, their ERP global implementation solutions, as well as their custom applications. Really within the next year, they'll be fully operational on those as new standard platforms.
I mean, that sounds obviously quite amazing. And I think that the real highlight of this discussion is that they are able to take all of these things that were likely sitting on that backlog we talked about, the initiatives that they know that they wanted to get to really get rid of this technical debt and shift towards innovation, but doing it all with some day one savings. So it's a pretty cool program and a great example.
Yeah, and to that point, right, we had been working with them for the year before we even started this program with the full recognition that these were things they needed to do. But without having a program that looked at a holistic approach, there was no way they were able to justify it within their budget to make these investments. So the only way for them to even move forward with the things that they knew they had to do was to create a program like this that allows them to understand how they can get from point A to point B, right? And if you want to have kind of a similar journey, right, the best way is just to engage. That customer was skeptical, as you know, many are, when you say, hey, we're going to show you a way that's reduces your risk, allows you to have money up front day one, and is still going to save you a ton of money down the road and allow you to invest in things you care from your business. But the way to prove it out is to engage on us and look at what we think the baseline savings are going to be. And that's a relatively painless process where we get a little bit of information and we look at what's the possible opportunity based on your operational size, the initiatives and objectives you have for an estate modernization, and what are the things that you would want to include as assumptions. And then once we have that, you decide if you want to take the next step, which is really sitting down with us for us to understand the areas of impact. If you could change one or two different applications, if there's one application that feels like an albatross for your organization, what are the things we can do? What are the solutions that this program offers to you that if you just try to tackle that project head on by itself as an isolated event can actually help you achieve? And then once we've had that conversation, we'll spend 3 to 6 weeks with you building the appropriate model, building the program, building the communication tools to work with your organization to say, yeah, this is a good solution for you. This is where you need to be moving forward. And the great thing about these assets these are assets that you can use beyond just working with us from an Oracle Cloud and Oracle technology perspective. These are assets that will hopefully help you begin to communicate the areas of investment that you can make within your IT estate that will then allow and drive innovation in other parts of your business.
So, the fun part is, figure out what the savings could look like. That's always a super fun part. And then get into the discussion around where are you going to see the most impact and do it through the strategic lens of what the business is trying to achieve. And then work with us and partner with us to use your real data and your real understanding of your environment to create this business case. And as Kyle said, I think sometimes it feels so difficult because we are in the weeds of it ourselves, but partnering with us, we can make it feel a little bit simpler and show you what we've learned by working with so many others. We mentioned the Hello workshop as the way that we get into understanding what impact should look like. We have a signature approach to thinking through hundreds of decisions and variables that you need to consider for your cloud evolution. And we really bring this to life with you. We promise it will be fun. We make a few-hour virtual workshop and we make it insightful, but also really enjoyable. So we really look forward to hearing from you and exploring how we can help shape your future together. It's as simple as shooting us an email at hello_us@oracle.com. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, everyone.